The U.S. Treasury Secretary denies that President Lai Ching-te was prevented from transiting through the U.S.
We are very careful to keep trade and national security separate. So the Taiwanese president's movements had nothing to do with our talks.
Thailand and Cambodia are holding to their ceasefire. How are China and the U.S. involved? The UK says it may recognize a Palestinian state if Israel does not agree a Gaza ceasefire soon. Plus,
we're on a nearly 40-year-old diesel powertrain that is now part of the newly opened National Railway Museum exhibition.
A warm welcome to Taiwan Plus News. I'm Reece. There's been speculation that a reported delay in President Lai Ching-te's August travel plans, which may have included U.S. stopovers, is tied to ongoing tariff talks between Washington and Beijing. But U.S. officials are denying the two are related. Cadence Coranto reports.
A trip to Latin America? Or maybe not. Speculation is stirring that Taiwan President Lai Ching-te has delayed an August visit to Latin American allies after Washington blocked his stopovers in the U.S., with some media reports suggesting the U.S. is trying to avoid irritating China amid high-stakes tariff talks. But when asked, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent denied this.
We are very careful to keep trade and national security separate. So the Taiwanese president's movements had nothing to do with our talks.
The U.S. State Department also responded, stressing that the U.S. had not changed its policy on stopovers by high-level Taiwanese officials.
Taiwan has not announced any travel plans for President Lai. So that is generally a hypothetical now. I know it's been in the news. There's been a lot of questions and a lot of suppositions here that have happened, but I can say that it is a hypothetical at this point. There have been no plans. Travel plans for the president. There's been, as a result, nothing canceled. I can tell you, though, a reiteration that transits by high-level Taiwan officials, including presidents, are fully consistent with our long-standing policy and practice. This has not changed.
The reactions come after Taiwan's presidential office on Monday said Lai had no plans for overseas trips in the near future. This raised some questions, as while Lai's Latin American tour was never officially confirmed by Taipei, local and international media had widely reported on an August trip to visit Belize, Guatemala, and Paraguay in Central and South America, a trip that would typically include stopovers in the U.S.
Often it's an opportunity to meet with senior U.S. officials, both in the executive and the legislative branch. It's also an opportunity for them to sort of meet with key allies within the U.S. And thirdly, it's a big media event. So a Taiwan president going through the United States on transit is able to get a lot of media publicity, is able to showcase what they are doing.
While the presidential office says Lai is staying in Taiwan to handle ongoing disaster recovery efforts and tariff talks with the U.S., there's speculation the U.S. might have come under pressure from China to deny the stopovers. In a post on Facebook, former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said Washington's reported move to block the stopover sends a dangerous signal and has some analysts worried about a change in U.S. policy towards Taiwan. And there are signs other high-level exchanges have been affected as well. The Washington Post says Taiwan's Defense Minister Wellington Koo had planned a trip to the U.S. to meet top military officials in June, but that visit was abruptly canceled after objections from China and is yet to be rescheduled. When asked, Taiwan's defense ministry refused to comment. With both sides keeping quiet about what's happening behind the scenes, uncertainty may linger for some time. Justin Wu and Cadence Coranto for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan is seeing a surge in Chinese military activity amid discussions over why President Lai's reported Latin America trip was pushed back. The Defense Ministry says it spotted 33 Chinese military aircraft and drones near Taiwan early on Wednesday. 23 of those aircraft entered Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. This area isn't Taiwan's airspace, but acts as a buffer zone for defensive purposes. Taiwan says it's monitoring the situation. China has also been ramping up its military activity near Japanese waters. Japan's defense ministry spotted a Chinese military submarine rescue ship transiting the Tsushima Strait on July 25th, and around the same time, Chinese state media released footage of J-20 stealth fighter jets flying over the same waters between Japan and Korea. They say the aircraft are the same ones that conduct patrols around Taiwan. To find out more about China's increasing military presence in the region, Alan Liu spoke with Tamkang University defense analyst Lin Yingyu.
China has been more active near the Tsushima Straits recently. Why do you think Beijing is stepping up these activities at this particular time?
它有一个目的，第一个就是它会去希望让日本不要把重心就是放在我们所谓的宫古海峡或者是西南海域，它会让日本也会感觉到它在日本海这一带，或者是在对马海峡这一带，也会去造成日本的威胁。它有一点要去逼迫日本的舰队或日本的防卫回防的意味。
Why is the Tsushima Strait strategically important, especially for Japan and for Taiwan?
对于这些海峡，从近亲海峡、对马海峡或者宫古海峡，甚至是巴士海峡，这一些都是解放军的船舰想要可以去突破到太平洋，就突破第一岛链的几个要口。那它可以去透过今天在这边的军队或舰队的一些行动，代表不是只有巴士海峡跟宫古海峡，我还有其他的地方可以去突穿。那这样子是不是会去迫使日本跟台湾就会彼此之间会有一些自顾不暇，或者是无法去做管理，或者是必须要去加强更多台日或其他国家的军事上面的合作，才有办法去围堵中国这样子的一个行动。
Looking at these developments, how can the U.S., Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan work more closely together to deter China's growing military presence and influence in the region?
首先第一个可能就是我们在这一个武器系统上面是不是有办法连线？因为像日本也有去，不管是12式飞弹或新式的飞弹，它基本上希望去强调的是用陆地去控制海洋。那可是今天如果它今天是走其他的海峡，可能我就飞弹没有部署在这里啊，所以其实今天会去强调的是，在以美国为首的这些国家，是不是有共同的通讯系统或通讯协定？在现在或许没有办法，但是当必要时候、战争的时候，这一些国家是不是有一些彼此的互助的协定，或者是在系统上面的连线？我会觉得这一些都会是现在我们第一个要去做突破或合作的地方。
That was defense analyst Lin Yingyu from Tamkang University. An international organization that aims to address challenges posed by China is set to hold its first gala in Taipei in August. The Interparliamentary Alliance on China is a group of legislators from around the world who work to combat China's efforts to erode democratic institutions. It says the Taipei Gala is a show of support for Taiwan at a time of growing uncertainty. The event is scheduled for August 26th and will bring together lawmakers from Taiwan and other countries around the world. The US and China have wrapped up a third round of trade talks in Sweden with no major breakthroughs. As the US races to finalize deals with its biggest partners before a tariff deadline on Friday, others, including Taiwan, are still in the negotiating phase. Aichi reports.
U.S. and Chinese officials depart from a government building in Stockholm after finishing their latest round of trade talks. Beijing says a 90-day pause on U.S. tariffs could be extended.
根据中美双方的共识，双方将继续推动美方已暂停的对等关税24%部分，以及中方反制措施，继续如期。
While the U.S. side says the decision needs approval from the top.
He'll have the final decision. I think our Chinese counterparts have jumped the gun a little and said that we do have an extension. I can say that the meetings were very far-reaching, robust, and highly satisfactory.
This latest round of talks reportedly focus on topics like rare earth supply and China's purchase of sanctioned Russian and Iranian oil. Both sides touted progress, though no major breakthroughs were announced and details remain murky. But U.S. President Donald Trump is confident a meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping is now more likely by the end of the year.
He wants to meet, and I look forward to the meeting too, but I would say before the end of the year. I mean, just to go full circle.
It comes as the U.S. and the European Union scramble to finalize a major trade deal ahead of Trump's Friday deadline. The agreement sets a baseline 15% tariff on most EU imports. Trump has hailed it as the biggest of them all, outstripping deals reached with other major trading partners like Japan and Vietnam. But many countries, including Taiwan, are still negotiating with the U.S. Bloomberg reports that Taipei is being asked to boost its U.S. investment to avoid a potential 32% tariff. Still, the U.S. says there's not much to worry about for those countries that have not struck a deal yet.
I would think that it's not the end of the world if these snapback tariffs are on for anywhere from a few days to a few weeks, as long as the countries are moving forward and trying to negotiate in good faith.
The new trade deals have raised confidence in some corners and prompt the International Monetary Fund to raise its 2025 global growth forecast to 3%. But the IMF warns that looming tariffs, stalled trade talks, and a return to protectionist policies could drag down growth and drive up inflation in the months ahead. Joseph Wu and I.Chi for TaiwanPlus.
The ceasefire between Thailand and Cambodia reached earlier this week seems to be holding. But where do China and the U.S. fit into negotiations around halting the conflict? John Van Trieste spoke to former U.S. Ambassador to Myanmar, Derek Mitchell, to find out.
What do you make of U.S. President Trump's willingness to use tariffs as a tool to push for a ceasefire between Thailand and Cambodia?
Well, he loves tariffs. He thinks it's the magic weapon that can be used on anything, it seems. But I mean, look, people use whatever leverage you can, I suppose, to try to end conflict. In the past, we've used political means, and this president in the United States decides to use economic means, assuming that is good leverage on these countries if they care in the middle of tariff negotiations to put their economic interests above some of these very deep-seated national issues.
Well, this part of the world is a place that China is very interested in. It's sort of in their backyard. What do you make of U.S. intervention and its significance for the region and maybe even for Taiwan?
Well, I mean, the United States has always intervened on issues in quiet ways, typically. I think President Trump tends to take a much more bombastic approach to things. So he took full credit for this, which I think is too much. But, quiet diplomacy, phone calls to leaders, encouragement, diplomatic engagement to try to lower the tensions, that always helps. I think it can be helpful. I think the Chinese, again, they do the same because it's in their interest and in their neighborhood, and they have good relations with both Cambodia and Thailand. I think it's a question mark for the region where they do want to be responsible for their own affairs. They don't want to be coerced by great powers. They don't want great powers interfering in their internal affairs.
This conflict between Thailand and Cambodia is long-standing and very emotive for both sides. Do you think the pressure from things like tariffs or from neighboring countries like China and Malaysia will be enough to put a lid back on this very deeply sensitive issue for people on both sides?
Well, it remains to be seen. They've got to work it out between the two of them, obviously. It's a very deep-seated nationalist issue for both of them. There's a lot of resentment that goes back decades. It's not just a single point. It's along the border in many different areas. So they have to have communications and settle this. They do have a boundary commission. I don't think this ends things, but conflict is the worst time to settle disputes. You at least have to stop the conflict and then let cooler heads prevail, and hopefully there'll be dialogue to get to some kind of lasting, sustained, stable settlement of some kind.
That was former U.S. Ambassador to Myanmar, Derek Mitchell. President Lai Ching-te says he's taking responsibility for his party's shortcomings after a recall movement launched by civic groups failed to unseat any opposition lawmakers.
民进党做得不够的地方，我要承担所有批评，也要向所有投入的公民团体与支持者深深致上歉意。
Lai, who is also the chair of the Democratic Progressive Party, said he respects the outcome of the vote. Voters overwhelmingly rejected campaigns that sought to unseat 24 lawmakers from the main opposition Kuomintang. Another vote to recall 7 KMT legislators is scheduled for August 23rd. Lai has ordered the DPP to offer full support to civic groups overseeing the remaining recall campaigns. Coming up after the break, we see how robotic heroes help Taiwan's firefighters save lives.
Thank you for sharing our passion for food and Taiwan. Veggie Island explores the vibrant world of plant-based cuisine.
Wow, this is amazing.
While Taiwan on the Rocks uncovers the stories and craftsmanship behind every sip.
Have you ever tried Taiwanese beer?
Are you ready to taste even more of Taiwan?
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. The UK has announced that it will recognize a Palestinian state if Israel's war in Gaza continues through September. It's part of increasing global calls for Israel to reach a ceasefire with Hamas and end the conflict amid growing starvation in Gaza. Tiffany Wong reports.
A stunning development in Israel's nearly 2-year war in Gaza. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer announces a major shift in policy, pledging to recognize a Palestinian state if Israel continues its war in the enclave.
As part of this process towards peace, I can confirm the UK will recognize the State of Palestine by the United Nations General Assembly in September, unless the Israeli government takes substantive steps to end the appalling situation in Gaza, agree to a ceasefire, and commit to a long-term sustainable peace, reviving the prospect of a two-state solution.
Starmer's remarks follow an announcement last week from French President Emmanuel Macron that his country would recognize Palestine. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu criticized the UK's announcement in a social media post, saying it rewards Hamas's terrorism and punishes its victims, while France's foreign minister welcomed it.
With the pivotal decisions announced by France and the United Kingdom, and with the combined efforts of the entire international community gathered here in New York, we want to end the cycle of violence and war and reopen the prospect of peace in the Near and Middle East.
It comes as the United Nations holds a multi-day discussion on a two-state solution, and as international pressure grows on Israel to reach a ceasefire with Hamas and end the nearly 2-year war that has seen over 60,000 people killed in Gaza. But missing from the UN talks, Israel and its biggest backer, the U.S., which has rejected calls for the two-state solution.
This is a publicity stunt that comes in the middle of delicate diplomatic efforts to end the conflict in Gaza. Far from promoting peace, the conference will prolong the war, will embolden Hamas, and reward its obstruction and undermine real-world efforts to achieve real peace.
The UK's move to recognize the state of Palestine was a surprise for its ally, the US, coming just one day after Starmer met with U.S. President Donald Trump in Scotland. The two held a joint press conference on Gaza, both pledging more humanitarian aid.
We never discussed it, surprisingly. It was never really discussed. Maybe a little bit at the news conference, but he was sort of discussing it with you. We never did discuss it, and we have no view on that.
With pressure growing on Israel to end its war and both the UK and France's deadline of September fast approaching, the global community will be keeping a close eye on Gaza and Israel's next moves. Chris Ma and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus.
Intense rainfall in central and southern Taiwan has caused flooding and triggered landslides. Landslides, blocked highways, flooding and power outages have been reported from Taichung to Chiayi. The area has seen short bursts of intense rainfall every day over the past week. The government has spent more than $300 million trying to boost flood controls in Chiayi and Tainan, But residents are asking why things are still not back to normal. Forecasters say the unstable weather could continue into next week. Over the past decade, 30 firefighters have died in the line of duty. To better protect these first responders, robots are being deployed across the country. Our reporter Sandy Chi looks at how these robots help keep first responders safe in hazardous situations.
When the alarms sound, firefighters spring into action, racing against time and sometimes into burning buildings, putting their lives at risk to keep the public safe. But now new technology is helping take on some of the most dangerous tasks.
可以代替我们就是来从事一些比方说像一个近距离必须要救援的一个灾害现场，我们可以先利用我们的救灾机器人，先到达现场，先去了解状况，然后以方便我们后续看说要调派什么样的救灾器材，或是要怎么样编组我们的救灾人员，这都有助于我们在救灾的过程中会比较完善。
These robots entered service in 2023. The same year, 4 first responders died in a factory fire in southern Taiwan.
我们就开始在考虑，是不是因为应该要加一些救灾机器人进来做辅助，可以造成消防人员尽量零伤害、零死亡，有效的帮助我们消防人员进行前部的勘察动作。
The robots have sensors to spot risky situations before firefighters enter.
像我身后的这一台，它有搭配热显像仪，还有搭配气体探测器。那它可以先行的先去到达现场，然后来面对高温以及易爆的现场，或者是有毒或是缺氧的环境，让现场的资讯能够先 pass 到我们的控制台，然后来回报给救灾指挥官，可以大大的来提升我们的救灾的安全保障以及效率。
Earlier this year, a chemical fire in Chiayi destroyed a firefighting robot, a loss that in different circumstances could have been a firefighter's life. And fire officials say Taiwan's many factories and makeshift buildings are hazards that make it dangerous for firefighters.
铁皮屋火灾最危险就是它的热效能热辐射。那只要一发生火灾，铁皮就会坍塌这时候如果有消防救灾机器人的话，它对我们来说是一个很大的帮助。
And now, more than 140 of these robots are working across Taiwan, most of them in New Taipei and Kaohsiung, where many factories pose a fire hazard. Still, these robots have limitations.
以这台电动驱动的机器人来说，基本上只要是蓄电池，大家都知道就是会有续航力的问题，所以后续未来可以朝向说可能是电量、电力的扩充，又或者是像我们充电时间的缩短，这都有助于说后续我们救灾机器人可以再次的投入到我们的救灾现场。
加工腿，加工腿。In the years since their introduction, these robots have proven their usefulness. And with improvements on the way, Taiwan's first responders will soon have even better tools as they work to put out fires and save lives. Chris Ma, Patrick Chen, Alec MacDonald, and Sandy Chi for TaiwanPlus.
For more on Taiwan's disaster response teams, you can head to our full interview show, Zoom In, Zoom Out, available on YouTube and TaiwanPlus.com. New figures from Taiwan's finance ministry show that the gender income gap dropped in 2023, though there's still a significant difference. On average, women had an annual total income of $16,000, while men made just over $25,000, or nearly 1.57 times more, for a gender pay gap of just over 36%. That's slightly down from the previous year, when men made 1.6 times more than women. Rail enthusiasts in Taipei are in for a treat. The country's oldest railway yard is reopening to the public starting Thursday. It's been turned into a museum as part of a government plan going back nearly 10 years. Irene Lin has this report.
A retired diesel power locomotive from the late 1990s, now turned into a living museum piece ready to be back on track for a new generation of passengers. After nearly a decade of planning and restoration, Taiwan's Culture Ministry is opening parts of the National Railway Museum to the public on July 31st.
时间就像一辆火车，它有一个长长的尾巴，我们怎么也拖不住它，时间就这样子过去了。今天站在这边，我非常感慨，就是所有的童年，过去大家的奋斗，包括刚才讲到，抗争、保留、修复，中间非常非常多辛苦的过程。
One of the few industrial museums in the country, the Taipei Railway Workshop was first known as the Taihoku Railway Workshop, set up in 1935 during the Japanese colonial era. Located in the heart of Taipei, it used to be the country's largest base for maintaining rolling stock, and is overseeing over 80 years of railway evolution. Since the yard was relocated in 2013, it was named a National Heritage Site in 2015, collecting dust and rust until an official plan for repurposing it kicked off the next year. Visitors will now get to experience the daily lives of railway engineers in the past, such as their workstations and even bathhouses. The National Railway Museum will fully open in the next few years as restoration work continues, welcoming railway enthusiasts and all those who grew up with the significance of this workshop to revisit the past. Howard Zhang and Irene Lin in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching Taiwan Plus News. I'm Reece. Take care, and we'll see you next time.